As we kick off the day, I think it's important to really start with the global. And sort of here in our panel, we're fortunate that we have Henk Ovink, who former and first global water ambassador. I like to call him Ambassador Henk. He will be moderating the panel. We have Raha Hakimdavar, also one of my, can I say, colleagues from Georgetown University, very proud Hoya, will be speaking, as well as Paula Kehoe, who's, I guess, making her way down, Paula, from San Francisco, as well as Paul Westerhoff, Regents professor from Arizona State University. So with that, I'll pass it over to the first water ambassador, Henk Ovink. Thank you.
Thanks so much. And this is your first keynote in 4. So we have 4 keys on 1 note, perhaps. Not sure how that will work, but we'll see. Great to be here. Great to see you all. And with this stellar panel, talking about the macro perspective, but also like to bring on some micro perspectives on water. How does it feel and work from on the ground here in the US, but also from around the world. Water, we talk about it a lot. Who in this room does not work on water? You work on what?
I'm learning more.
But what's your field? I think you're going to be the hero of the day, because managing water is only a very small side of the poor status of our hydrological cycle. Because undermining water security does not come from all of you. Even if you're moderated in what you do, you're pretty much taking care of the water that that's part of within your mandate as a scientist, policymaker, investor, entrepreneur, NGO, community leader, student, retired, activist, doesn't really matter, diplomat. Water is managed outside of the water sector. So if we continue to talk to one another on how to do better, water never will be in a better space. Because water is managed in energy, in food, in health, in cities, in the environment, in communities, in investor, in boardrooms, in local to global dialogues where nobody, like our keynote speaker said, has any clue about water. So get out there with that understanding and listen before advocating for water, how these connections work across these things. The second thing is, and that's why it's amazing that you're here, water is managed by land. More than half of the rain on land comes from land, not from evaporation. It comes from transpiration. Trees, soils, wetlands, plants transpire water into the atmosphere, and that's undermined by land use practices that are definitely unsustainable. So when we talk about agriculture, you always say 70%, some regions it's 90%, like Asia, consume water. Devastating or not, in some parts of the US it might be, but the impacts of bad land management by these agriculture practices is way more devastating. It has a crippling effect forever on our water system. So we have to bring our knowledge to those other sectors. And I think with this stellar panel, we can. We have Raha Hakimdavar. It all began with water, Raha. You were collecting rainwater in pots and pans when you were little, right? Yeah, I heard that story. But you're also a hydrologist and science policy leader. Currently serves as the senior advisor to the deans of Georgetown University's Earth Commons Institute and Georgetown University in Qatar. And as a research professor, she previously directed space sciences at Ball Aerospace. You led UN water security efforts at NASA Goddard and worked with USDA Forest Service. You're a Fulbright scholar, hold a bachelor in civil engineering and a master and a PhD in hydrology and water management from Colombia. So, welcome home. Paula, Kehoe, California, West Coast. You learned the values of water through all these family trips, right? With your siblings and your parents, with the caravan, traveling all the parks in the US, really understanding the true value of nature and water. And you continue to champion those values. Paula is the Director of Water Resources at the San Francisco Public Utilities Commission, where she oversees programs to diversify the city's water supply through conservation, groundwater, reuse, and innovation. Spearheaded San Francisco's pioneering on-site non-potable water reuse legislation, chairs the National Blue Ribbon Commission for On-Site Systems, and serves on the Water Reuse Association Board. You hold a degree from Colorado Boulder and the University of San Francisco. Welcome from the West Coast. And then Paul Westerhoff, Dr. Paul Westerhoff. I think water is written together with innovation across everything you do. A true believer in how innovation can spark impact. A Regents professor at Fulton Chair of Environmental Engineering at Arizona State University. Elected to the US National Academy of Engineering in 2023. Your research centers on drinking water treatment, water reuse, and emerging contaminants such as nanomaterials and organics. You have published extensively, you hold patents, and led major NSF research centers. Paul earned his PhD from the University of Colorado Boulder and earlier degrees from UMass Amherst and Lehigh University. Welcome, all three of you. Now, we were going to look at the macro aspect, but I'd like to bring in, with Raha, some perspectives from the Middle East and the Gulf. You've been based there. You learned there, your experience there, on innovation, on finance, and on water security. What can we learn from that region so water stressed, but also so much focused on innovation, also leading the next UN Water Conference in the UAE, that are going to be valuable here for the US, but also for the world. Please kick us off.
Yeah, absolutely. So I've been in Qatar for the last couple of years, and it's been really eye-opening. And I think that there are really interesting examples there that relate to the rest of the world. So as, first of all, yeah, it is really nice to be back to Colombia. And I will say just the importance of education. Actually, Professor Lal was one of my professors. Professor Diodatis was on my defense committee. So I just want to highlight how nice it is to actually have this forum at a university and to reiterate the importance of education and inspiring the next generation. So, so with that, yeah, I would say the level of scarcity in the region is probably, as you can imagine, extreme. So in Qatar, the average rainfall is less than 100 millimeters per year, less than 100 millimeters per year. And often, actually in recent years, it's been around 80 millimeters per year. I don't remember last year in the times that I was there, because I do travel a lot, a single day of rainfall. So the challenge is there for these countries. And a lot of the countries, and I'll kind of clump them into what's called the Gulf Cooperation Council, which is 6 countries. It includes Bahrain, Oman, Kuwait, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and the UAE. It's kind of a political, and the history of this, the GCC is a political and defense, but it's actually turned into a strong economic and now going into other areas like collaboration around science and technology. So the challenge is there for these countries. And then, you know, the second thing that we know is that the financial capability is there. These are relatively wealthy countries. But a lot of that wealth has come from, or almost in some cases, all of the wealth has come from oil and gas, the petrochemical sector, which, of course, the countries are also aware they're going to need to diversify. So actually, if you look at, they all have a kind of a national vision, which is very, very high level, but really lays out in a lot of ways their plans to diversify their economies in this world that's moving away from petrochemicals. And one of the things that really stands out is environment and sustainability. And around that, actually, water is a big connecting force. So in addition to kind of this, or actually in terms of meeting their own national and regional challenges with water scarcity, they are really innovating. And I'd say they're taking a lot more risks when it comes to some of the things that maybe would be more challenging to take on in other places, and when it comes to the R&D world. So, for example, looking at non-conventional water resources, of course we know desalination, and the region by far leads the amount of desalination. Saudi Arabia is, definitely the leader in the world, but that's been actually for the past 40 years. So it's not necessarily new, but there's a lot of innovation that comes with decarbonizing that sector, because it has traditionally been very very energy intensive. It's become less and less so as our tech has evolved, and we have nanomaterials and things that are just more efficient. But there's also investment being made in solar desalination and just in bringing more efficiency. But other areas that actually are less maybe known or less talked about are things like fog harvesting, things like the condensate that comes from all the air conditioning that's run all the time, actually recapturing that and reusing it. So there's a lot of thinking around circularity. And then another area is weather modification, which is an area that actually has some geopolitical implications tied to it. But what I mean by that is cloud seeding. And actually, the UAE has a rainfall enhancement research program as part of their Met office that's open to global PIs. Anybody can apply for this program, and so they're really trying to understand, how we can make the most of the limited water that we have available to us and to reuse it. And then the last thing I'll mention is that as part of this, I guess leading in the environment and sustainability fields, they're also really trying to show up globally and putting some of the capital that they have towards the global good. So, for example, the UAE, of course, along with Senegal, is hosting the next UN Water Conference in 2026. But they also have been making some interesting investments, like through the Mohammed bin Zayed Water Initiative, which gave $150 million to USD to the X Prize Foundation, and opened it up to a competition for, again, like global competition to innovate around desalination. And just the connection on that is actually, I also work in Greece in addressing water scarcity challenges with a lot of the Greek islands, and more those islands are relying on desalination. So actually, even though I know it seems like it's really tailored for the Gulf, actually it is a solution space that many other places are also looking at.
Thanks so much, Raha. So a lot to learn from the Gulf and the Gulf states and the Middle East under pressure, not only because of behaviors of others and the very dry conditions and arid conditions there, but also because of past and current behaviors there. Pushes innovation over our current thinking, our understanding, and that drives opportunities, investments that could be scalable and replicated elsewhere. So a risky environment with a lot of opportunities for risky business that can actually trigger new things. Great. Paula, your lessons from the West Coast to the world, but also here in the US, I guess, are amazing. Can you share some of those lessons in the context of how we are going to have to deal with these water insecurities, and inspire us a bit from working there, how we can all do better?
Great, thank you. Well, I am an optimist, so I just want to let you all know that before I provide my remarks. So I work for the San Francisco Public Utilities Commission. We are a municipal public agency, so we're part of the city and county of San Francisco government. We provide 3 utility services: water, power, and sanitation. Within our water utility, we serve 2.7 million people in the San Francisco Bay Area. We have about 85% of our water comes from Yosemite National Park, very unique that we have a reservoir located in a national park. That water travels all the way by gravity over 165 miles across California to San Francisco. It was built about 100 years ago, and it's truly an engineering marvel. Within our power enterprise, it's all green. While that water travels to the city, it produces hydropower. We also have wind and solar, and again, completely green portfolio. Within our wastewater or sanitation utility, we operate a combined sewer system in San Francisco, which is pretty unique. New York has about 60% of New York is a combined sewer system. Older cities like Seattle and Portland, that means we collect and treat both stormwater and wastewater in the same set of pipes that's then sent to our treatment plants and discharged, and for our case, to the Pacific Ocean and the San Francisco Bay. So we have been really proud of providing reliable utility services for over 100 years. But we have a number of challenges, and these challenges aren't unique to San Francisco or to California. I think they're global challenges: aging infrastructure, water scarcity, extreme wet weather events, really taxing our infrastructure, taxing our supplies. We also have challenges of affordability, and also challenges thinking about changing how we approach our delivery mechanisms. In other words, we've been focused on centralized linear infrastructure for over 100 years. It's great, it's been very successful, but we really need to rethink that. And also thinking about our governance and business models as utilities. So in San Francisco, we've taken taking those challenges and again looked at them as opportunities. For example, we have a One Water SF program, which really approaches our utility instead of our 3 different silos: water, wastewater, and power, and thinking about them more integrated, working more collaboratively. Sounds easy, but it's actually not, because people have been in their silos for a very, very long time. But One Water is, again, not unique to San Francisco. Many utilities are adopting that, recognizing that having more of an integrated approach and more collaborative approach, we can create multi-benefits with our projects and certainly hope with reducing costs as well. We've also changed our, well, in terms of our approach, we focus on, from the water side, reducing demands. Using water as efficiently as possible, water conservation, is really our most important water supply that we have. If we can reduce demands, that really, again, prevents the building of more expensive centralized infrastructure in the future. So we've been focusing on water conservation for over 35 years. We have among the lowest per capita in the state of California, half the statewide average. So we've been doing that with a partnership with our community. So we provide financial rebates for fixtures, again, working with the community. But it's really been an ongoing partnership. We've had to address financial issues, of course, within the utility by asking our customers. We're in the business of selling water, but we're asking our customers to use less water. Clearly, that has revenue impacts. But we continue that, again, because the importance of the cost effectiveness. For example, we're providing rebates for toilets now that can save up to 37% more water than the California standard. So we go above and beyond what's required in standards. We're looking at new technologies like water recirculating showers, for example. Again, how can we potentially apply that? We are also looking at changing our governance models and institutional models. So in San Francisco, we established, which was mentioned in the intro, our on-site water recycling program. What that means is that we currently require new developments over 100,000 square feet to install their own on-site water treatment system to recycle the water that they produce in that building to produce water for toilet flushing, irrigation, and clothes washing. This approach really has transformed how we work as a utility. The utility, of course, clearly, historically, has provided all the services, water, wastewater, and recycled water. But now we have a shared partnership and shared management and responsibility with the private sector who are coming into San Francisco to build multifamily, mixed-use, and commercial buildings. That responsibility of these decentralized water systems are all on the private side. They're not paid for by the public utility. They're not operated or maintained. And that program, we've also established a national collaborative, and now we have an international collaborative. We can talk about that a little later if we have time, but it's all about scaling that concept up. I want to just make sure I mention that Battery Park here in New York City really was one of the very first communities in the United States to have on-site decentralized water treatment systems. What was required for us to do that was to establish enabling legislation from the city's perspective. Sometimes we think regulation is a, maybe a hinder, but we actually established enabling legislation. And we did this ahead, and so we could, as a utility, see the water savings and the efficient buildings that were being built in San Francisco. It was also a partnership with the private sector who wanted to build green buildings and sustainable buildings and get LEED Platinum. So there really was a partnership, and continues to be a partnership. And just the third thing I'll just mention is that we're also looking at purified water, which is taking wastewater for drinking water at a centralized scale and serving our customers that water. So part of all that I wanted to just sort of circle this around is that we're looking at multiple scales, clearly micro scales of toilets and potential recirculating showers, to larger buildings, 100,000 square feet, to centralized infrastructure. So our approach is that we're looking at all of these different scales, all different kinds of water supplies, but also, again, focusing on demand reduction because it's the most cost-effective supply that we have. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Paula, for sharing. It seems that from where you started presenting what you're doing is that where San Francisco and the Bay Area is coming from is already amazing. It's already above the average standard that we see here in the US and around the world. But where you're heading, a far more holistic, longer-term, collaborative, across scales, across sectors, across everything approach can really be a novel standard. So you don't need to answer now because I go to Paul first, but think about how that would work. Because what works in the Bay Area, if that can work elsewhere, it's not easily adopted. It's not that all of a sudden what works somewhere is adopted elsewhere. So I think that's one, and I have another question for all three of you. First, Paul, your research is founded in practice. You're a strong believer on how innovation works. Can you share from perhaps both perspectives, in the context of the challenges we face on water, a little bit like Raha and Paula did, how that can inspire others to take this forward?
Sure. So thanks. I'll tell a little personal thing first, and then kind of go into the opportunities, I think, for innovation to occur. So I grew up here in New Jersey, and one of my jobs was actually like emptying a dehumidifier in the basement and getting rid of water. And so then I moved to Colorado, where it got a little drier, then Arizona, where it got even drier. And so in Arizona, now last year we started the International Atmospheric Water Harvesting Association, trying to not get rid of the water, but to actually collect the water out of the air. And in Arizona, what I found is we've gotten really good at evaporating water. And I'll come back to this as a theme in a moment. You talked about it in terms of plants, and so really good at evaporating water. So the first, 15 or 20 years of being a professor, I focused on chemicals in water and reducing human exposure to chemicals, new technologies, and that was really my passion and kind of motivation, is potable drinking water for human consumption. And along the way, over and over, at every conference I go to, I heard people don't value water enough, and until they buy designer water, maybe. But so over the last 5 to 10 years, in these different National Science Foundation centers, where we work closer to industry, I've really thought about water very different. I think about water now as water is the largest volume chemical used in manufacturing. More than methanol, more than ethanol even, right? More than any chemical solvent. And they think about it and they know that it needs to be purer and purer than anything else on Earth. So to make computer chips, for example, in Arizona, we have fabs that are making lots of computer chips. They need the highest quality water on Earth. They start with tap water and make it way, way better. So, I think they're very willing to adopt technology, and they understand the cost of water in terms of the value it brings to manufacturing. So I've really been thinking a lot more about, kind of water in industrial applications rather than, humans. I think there's a lot of people thinking about it from the human point of view, but water in industry makes jobs. And so, John, I was so excited that you talked about AI, and I think there's a way to kind of frame this. You started this discussion around water and AI and the huge impacts and maybe the opportunities it'll have to solve water problems. But what we're doing in one of our new centers called a Southwest Futures Innovation Engine is to think about, kind of developing water technologies across sectors. So I look at AI as a sector, and yes, you evaporate water. And so, okay, we've now looked at how do you recondense that water and actually use evaporation as a, desalination process. But really thinking deeper, what is it, why are data centers using water? They're using it to get rid of heat, right? So they bring in megawatts of power, and they just use it to get rid of heat. And it's the cheapest, lowest hanging fruit to get rid of heat. So what if we really use this opportunity to think about how can we use waste heat to do something beneficial with water? So parts of the country, you come from parts where they do district heating. Well, we don't need district heating in Arizona, but it's waste heat. A huge amount of waste heat is going to be generated. And so what could we do in the positive sense of the environment, maybe around water for waste heat? But then I think you need to go deeper into this supply chain. What's inside of all these data centers that are being built? Huge amounts of concrete, they use water, right? But, computer chips and copper, right? There's more copper wire inside of a data center than you can imagine. So where does copper come from? It comes from mining. They use intensive amounts of water. They use really interesting chemicals to selectively separate things. And if you think about where are those computer chips going to go after 5 years, when they take out the computer chips and put in new computer chips from recycling, we could recycle the materials, but that's going to use water, and we're going to need to remove cobalt or all the other exotic elements in there. So I think as you start to think through this entire AI revolution and the material intensity it's going to use, there's huge opportunities for new water technologies, selective separations of copper, biodegradable surfactants to be used in copper mining, waste heat separation, how to recondense the water out of the atmosphere and use a data center to make ultra-pure water for, say, coupling it, building with high manufacturing needs nearby. So I really see this revolution where trillions of dollars are going to be put into this thing that the water sector can think of more than just serving it, but we should learn and how to take advantage to drive innovation of technologies in the industrial sector that then can come back maybe into the municipal sector to selectively remove arsenic from water or other things to go back to closing the cycle of improving human health. But there's a tremendous opportunity. They're early adopters, and they need ultra-clean water. So I really think it's an opportunity to drive innovation.
Yeah, thanks, Paul. And I like your passion, also from humans to industry and where you literally find that opportunity. But then we as a water sector have to figure out how that conversation starts to work. So if all of you three can now think a little bit, because there were two other questions, on an elevator pitch and pick your industry. Paul already picked AI, but you can switch. Health, environment, energy, climate, finance, cities, geopolitical, the UN, it doesn't really matter. But something that's not the water industry. And do your elevator pitch in the sense that water being the connector, the solution space to where things work, where that value is valued, not so much only in a financial way, but in a cultural, environmental, societal way. How would that elevator pitch work in such a way that that leads to a collaboration that's that innovative, that it's driving opportunities for capacity investments and beyond? So just a little bit to chew on towards the end of the panel, because making those connections, like you say, is going to be key. But as we heard in the keynote, there's no much interest in those sectors. They speak different languages. They get around different tables. They're not here in this room. And that's not because they didn't know how to take the subway. It's just because they are talking to other people here in New York City during Climate Week and UNGA. Okay, the other thing you wanted to talk about is the relationship between macro and local. Macro risks to water security, how do they play out locally, and how can local solutions, local opportunities create an opportunity for this macro perspective? Knowing that there's a UN conference coming up, that might be an opportunity. The second perspective that in the preparation of this dialogue that we touch upon, how could those opportunities lead to something that you called investable? So where is it attractive for public and private funding, and what is a new way of looking at blended finance in these things? So I start again with Raha. How does the macro play out locally, and how that creates opportunities for investments?
Yeah, so I'm going to come back to the US and go to the West. And as you mentioned, I used to work at the US Forest Service. So by far, the national forests are located in the western part of the US, also where we have a lot of issues with water scarcity. So I don't know if everybody knows this, but actually in the west of the US, it's estimated that around 20% of our community's water comes from national forest lands. If you add other forested lands that not under the US Forest Service, it's even more than that. And in some places, actually, over 50% of the water is coming from water that's being generated from these national forests. So actually, I think it's been said, this connection between land and water is super important. Now let's bring the macro. Climate change and a realistic threat of wildfires. That's increasing. We're getting more fires. They're more intense. Seasonally, we've seen shifts, and you read about it in the news. But actually, that connection between fires and water is super important, not just in the immediate aftermath of a fire, which can lead to, floods. There's definitely a risk of flooding. There's a risk of debris flow. But actually, longer term, we've done studies where we were able to see that there is a reduction in the amount of water that you have in that watershed if you have recurrent burns in a majority of these forested lands. So that's the scope of the challenge. And I think that's something that's not always kind of connected between the wildfires and water quantity in the long term. So now a really interesting solution is an organization called the Blue Forest. They came up with the first forest resilience bond of the U.S. In the Yuba watershed. And so the concept of this, I'll super simplify it since I'm not a finance person, but essentially that they would get philanthropy and private sector to pay for the costs up front to do restoration work in that watershed that was at risk of fires and droughts. And then over time, the beneficiaries, the downstream beneficiaries from that watershed, which would be utilities, states, they would pay back in some complicated, interesting financial mechanistic way that I won't get into. I'm sure you all know much more than I do. But I think that's a really interesting, elegant way of addressing the macro and the micro at the same time. And I think it's a model that can be replicated in other places as well. And actually, maybe you have some experience with that in San Francisco. I'm not sure, but yeah. So I would give that example as both kind of a really important challenge that we're facing and a potential solution that I think is simple yet took many years because you're having to bring together a lot of different stakeholders that are not used to talking to each other around this topic, not used to working with each other in this way.
Thanks so much, Raha. And a World Bank study that came out 2 weeks ago based on the report of the Global Commission on the Economics of Water I spearhead, showed that exactly what you say, investing in biodiversity restoration, 1, conservation, 2, and 3, healthy soils. So these 1, 2, 3, in the context of droughts that will become way more severe. And droughts, as you all know, are contrary to floods, GDP wreckers, because they have a rippling effect across years, even decades, impacting GDP in a negative way. So investing in these 3 ways in our land, biodiversity, restoration, conservation, and healthy soils, reduces that loss on GDP with 90%, 90. So there's a business case for investing in nature. You knew this as a child, Paula, but yeah, it's true. Okay, to you, how does the macro and the micro work together for you? Listening also to Raha and how, because she actually talked about your region, the west of the US, so you might add your perspectives there.
Yeah, I'd like to just go back to utilizing the decentralized water systems as an example. I think, again, we in San Francisco wanted to explore that for mainly water scarcity issues. And we created this legislation, as I mentioned, and it's moved forward over the past decade. With that, has created a whole market. So there's many more companies in San Francisco in terms of both folks that come in and install these treatment systems, as well as operators for these treatment systems. So it really has created a business marketplace. One of our companies, I won't mention, but always is out on the road talking about this. And again, that company has been very successful, as well as others, because we put this legislation in place. It really, again, spurred a whole nother market in terms of an economic development opportunities in San Francisco. But we recognize that there's other places in the U.S., again, as I mentioned, in New York, Hawaii also, lots of places that are contemplating and thinking about, as well as implementing, that the decentralized water treatment systems with centralized infrastructure, recognizing the benefits that these systems can provide. New York, again, looks at this really mainly from a wastewater discharge. Can this help them with their wastewater infrastructure? West is always water scarcity. But so we established a partnership. I chair a collaborative across the United States. This is about how we can work together collaboratively from a public agency perspective, public health regulators, water, wastewater, utilities. How do we develop programs for proper oversight and management? So we're protecting public health with these decentralized water treatment systems that are not operated by utilities. And so we've been very successful. There's been legislation that's been passed in multiple states. And that initiative has also led to what we've established now, which is BUILD, which is building infrastructure locally for decentralized water systems, which is a global community. Decentralized water treatment systems have been installed in Japan for decades. There's over 2,500 systems in Japan. India and Bangalore requires decentralized water treatment systems. In South Africa, they just passed a regulation to allow decentralized water treatment systems in their communities. So there's a whole host of different, Europe is doing a lot of decentralized water treatment systems for energy recovery. So there's just a lot of these different types of applications that are happening for different reasons, and the drivers are all great drivers, but how do we actually implement and how do we work collaboratively? And so our BUILD initiative is a very exciting initiative. We're able to do and think collectively and globally on the macro level. How can we accelerate decentralized water systems where it makes sense? Of course, it's always about local context. It doesn't make sense everywhere to install these treatment systems, but it does help many communities. And so, again, I think we've taken it from the local level in San Francisco, we've built it to a national level, and now we're building even further to an international level. Our BUILD, we've expanded our partnership and collaborative to not just public agency, which is what our original US focused is to include everyone that's participating. So we have academia, we have operators, we have product manufacturers, we have utilities, we have public health regulators. We're all coming together collaboratively. We're developing a roadmap about really what is the key things that we need to do in order to accelerate. Some of those things are already underway. We have AEVAG in Zurich, for example, who's doing research for us. Again, I think it's about the connection between all of the stakeholders. How can we work collaboratively in order to advance a solution? There's lots of solutions out there. This is one that can help us with our managing our water challenges and
Thanks so much,
wastewater
Paula.
challenges.
And it's Raha ended on this note of collaboration. Collaboration is not easy, but it's super valuable. It adds. Can you a little bit talk about the magic, why it works? Because it's so easy. Oh, we brought everybody together across everything, la la la. We did some legislation, and now whang, magic. But it's harder than that.
It is. Personally, I have some scars. You can't see them. But when we started in San Francisco, just a quick story, we brought together our public health department, our public works, and our building department, key entities. The building inspector told me over his dead body, would he ever allow such a program to happen in San Francisco? I was like, wow, that's interesting. So what did that say to me, signal to me, who was very invested and wanted to make this happen, was listening. What are your concerns? What are you concerned about from a building perspective, from plumbing perspective? And that, I think, is what we talk a little bit about, the magic, is actually I knew what I wanted to do. I was very open, but I was also willing to listen. And listening, you understand what are the challenges they're facing, and then developing a program, legislation that addresses those challenges. And that's what we did in San Francisco. So yes, it sounds easy now when I sit here and tell you it's all required, but it did take a lot of hard work. It took a lot of discussion. And I think that's the frustration, I think, that we have, is that these solutions take time, they take partnerships, they take trust, they take people willing to be open-minded about changing how we've traditionally done our business. And those are the softer things, but those are very, very critical and key if we are really going to make transformation.
Thank you. That's really inspirational. And I think you said frustration, but this is where inspiration comes from. We all love hard work, and hard work pays off when we invest in people. And like you said, my mother always taught me inclusivity is a verb, not a noun. You have to practice it 24/7, but it pays off. And you literally show it pays off. Thanks for sharing. Paul, on this, we started off macro, micro, but ended up on collaboration. So a progressive conversation. Can you pick this up in the context of your pitch? Yeah.
Sure. So I think my pitch will start something like this. We sit in a city today that 100 years ago was one of 5 cities in the world with over 10 million people in it. So today, over half the global population lives in cities over 10 million people. This has been a trend that's been occurring, this urbanization trend, yet we still, at the same time, need food and resources within these urban settings. So the other global trend is fewer and fewer farmers are producing more and more food, and people living in cities are becoming further and further related from agriculture. So I think the other global trend that's occurring is this concept of perception of food versus agriculture. And I think the water opportunity in there is tremendous, right? So traditional agriculture, grow alfalfa in Arizona, we use over 9 feet of water, right? So how could you change this? We don't eat alfalfa. We feed it to the cows that then we get dairy and beef products from. So the other trend that's occurring is indoor food production. So not necessarily indoor agriculture, but producing food. From one extreme of cultured meat or growing mushrooms, right, as direct food, as opposed to thinking about plowing fields. And you can go further. You can say food in terms of marijuana-induced brownies or other products. Like, that's what people in urban areas think of. They don't think of a stalk of corn, right? They think of, corn syrup that is in their soda, right? Whether it's healthy or not, who knows? But I think it's a transition of thinking that has to go on with water around agriculture versus food. So in cities, people want food closer to them. So you see prolific growth, lots of challenges in things like, indoor agriculture. But, they're trying. It's a super, innovative areas. Investors are challenged by this local food production. But there's tremendous water savings that can go on when you do indoor food production, not indoor agriculture. Nutrient recovery, vapor recovery. You can pump CO2 into these, rooms. That I think you're going to see this other global trend of local food production. And I think that's going to have transformational benefits for water cycles.
Amazing, Paul. Bringing it back to the scale of food instead of on how it's produced and where the money is made, and infusing that conversation with your water knowledge and talent in the context of our urbanizing challenging. Thanks so much. Amazing pitch. Yeah, a hand of applause here. It's the first. Yeah. And Paul choose cities and food and agriculture. So that's amazing. Raha, and then Paula, you're last. What's your pitch? Which is the sector
we're on
that
to
you
the
choose?
pitches. Okay.
Yeah, so I asked you to think about your elevator pitch, choose a sector, and how to... And Paul was head on, so he stole your cities and food.
He did steal mine, but I'm going to say it still.
Yeah.
I am going to build on it. The agriculture is huge. Food is huge. Food security is huge. And I can build on what you said and connect it to where I'm at now. So when I walk into the supermarket in Qatar, there is food from every part of the world, literally. The beef comes from Brazil and Australia. The almonds come from California. How much water does it take to grow a single almond? I think it's 1 to 3 gallons. The rice predominantly comes from India. So this is not just a water scarce region, it's a food scarce region. And they're facing they're facing the challenge, but they're looking at 2 solutions. One is self-sufficiency. So actually part of what you said, Paul, about that kind of innovation in indoor food production. I've been to one of the biggest commercial farms in Qatar, and they have mushrooms that the technology has been developed in Holland, and they grow them, and those are almost all of the mushrooms that you can really find in the supermarkets are coming from the indoor production. So that's interesting. But at the same time, I think that there is this self-sufficiency interest, but they're still relying on groundwater. There is still a water need for to meet domestic production. So, like for example, in Qatar, they're using 4 times the amount of groundwater than is being regenerated. So that's one. And the second is, when I gave the example of walking into the supermarket, there's food and it's labeled from all the different places that it comes. That's virtual water, right? That's this concept of the almonds that are grown with the water scarcity challenges in California, or the water challenges in Brazil for livestock production. Then we're increasing demand, right? We're increasing the demand because this global trade is very complex. The global food trade is very complex. And so when, let's say, the GCC, that region, let's say Qatar, is booming, it's building, people are coming in, the population's doubled in the last 15, 20 years. And that's not going to change. I mean, it's part of their economic diversification, as I kind of said. But with more people, you need more water. So whether that's coming from the domestic production, which is very challenging, it's almost to the point of terraforming, to be able to grow your own food in these desert landscapes. Or if it's, or on the other hand, it's putting demand on the global markets. I think that's, what's my pitch in that? My pitch is we need to pay attention to that. I think that the food people are separate from the water people. You know that, Henk. And the finance people are separate from the water people, and you have the forest people that are separate from the water people. I think my pitch is that we really need to understand the interconnectedness of our world when it comes to water flows and where the pressure points are in order to alleviate the challenges in any one place.
Thanks so much, Raha. And again, you know, from cities to food to a very arid and resources scarce region, and how virtual water trade can actually benefit or undermine water scarcity from a global to a very local level. Thanks. Last but not least, Paula.
Yikes, hate being last. No. I think housing and developers, I think there's just a big disconnect between, you know, we need more housing, we need, you know, affordable housing, we need all of this development, which is very disconnected to water. You know, they will build it and you will deliver, right? And so there's this big, very, very big disconnect. We all want housing, we all want affordable housing, but I think that what I would say is, can we develop more collaborative relationships and partnerships with the developer community to think about water efficiency and water efficient buildings of the future and cities and communities.
Thanks so much. And thank you for this stellar panel. We ran 2 minutes over. I hope that's okay, Manu and the team. Amazing insights from around the world here in the US and the Gulf, but also a clear focus on making those connections. Connections across sectors, connections across scales and systems, but predominantly connections across people. Listening first before posing our ideas, but then in infusing our ideas into other sectors to ensure that water stays front and center. Valuing water stays front and center, water innovations, tech and investment opportunities stay front and center. And those relationships across food, energy, waste, finance, cities and housing are key. Thanks so much. Big hand of applause for this amazing panel.